Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. Is it Monday? I think it's Monday. All right, happy Monday. We have an amazing show for everybody today. What do we have?
Indeed we do. Yeah. Welcome back, sir.
Thank you.
We have missed you very much.
Yeah, I've missed you guys too. I really have. It's been an experience. Any new parent. I was just regaling Krystal. I've been tracking all of my sleep metrics and everything. It's been devastating, but it's fine. Yeah, it's all worth it.
What it is.
We have a beautiful daughter at home. Thank you to my incredible wife, to the team here for covering for me, for both the in-laws. Everybody's been stepping up very much at home. So it's been an amazing experience. I'll have more to say later. I actually want to do a monologue about all my medical bills. So I think people will enjoy that.
Are you Medicare for All guy yet?
Not yet, but we're getting there. We're getting close. Yeah, I'll talk about it. You know, we're prepared for one of the bills. You know, but unfortunately, my daughter had to spend some time in the NICU and transfer and all of that. And I will go down line by line just to show people. I think people should know what it actually costs if you have a terrible medical.
Oh, absolutely.
But, everybody's fine now, so thank you very much. Thank you to the audience for putting up with it. And Ryan, Emily, everybody in the control room, everybody in the team, done an amazing job while I was gone. And I'm doing my best over here. So if I have any bad takes, you can just blame it all on Steve. All right.
Can I get that dispensation as well?
Yes, absolutely can. You should call it in. Listen, I have more sympathy now. You should use the parent card 10 times more often.
Well, luckily, we have a really light news day for you to just ease back in. Nothing that's contentious or difficult to parse through. Things that we always agree on. So it should be great. Obviously, we're following what's going on in LA. We've got the very latest. Team was up late pulling, images from last night. Of course, the National Guard has been federalized. Extraordinary things going on there with regards to Trump. So we'll get into all of that. We've also got the latest in the Trump-Elon fallout. I am excited to hear from Saagar on that particular issue. I'm sure you guys are as well, to hear what he is thinking about the whole bromance falling apart. We had Kash Patel on Joe Rogan while the Elon Trump thing was going on, and Elon's out there posting that Trump is on the Epstein list, and Kash Patel is being confronted like in real time with, hey, what's going on there? So that's pretty interesting. We've got the Trump administration caving on Kilmar Abrego Garcia, although there is a big catch. They are charging him. He has been indicted. So got all of those details. J.D. Vance went on with Theo Vaughn, a number of interesting moments, some of them amusing, some of them revealing. We'll get into that. And then we may be able to, it's still a little bit up in the air, we may be able to get to the spokesperson for that Gaza aid flotilla. All the members of that flotilla, including Greta Thunberg, have now been arrested and are being held by the IDF in an Israeli prison. So, there are some wild images coming out from there as well. So whether or not we get the spokesperson on, we will cover that. And hopefully we'll be able to talk to her and get her take on all of that. Before we jump in with the latest coming out of LA, you guys have overwhelmed us with your support. Thank you so much. We've gone back to offering the monthly subscription by popular demand and free monthly trial. Go to breakingpoints.com, put in BP free, give us a try for a month, see if you enjoy it, see how you feel about it. Saagar, I don't know if you're aware of this. Ryan has been threatening to do HIMS ads if people don't sign up. So.
Actually, I think they need some help because RFK Jr. has been attacking them. So listen,
really?
I guess
Wait, over what?
It's too complicated. There's all this stuff about what is it called? Generic compounded GLP-1, like they're basically the semaglutide.
Okay.
Ozempic, basically the generic semaglutide, and they're going after companies like Hims and Noom and all these other places. So anyway, we can talk about that later. It's actually an interesting story. Okay. One of the ones I was tracking.
So save Ryan from having to do
Hims ads and finasteride. Is that what it's called? I think it is the balding medicine. But anyway, thank you. Actually, it has been incredible. I was checking back in. I was looking at the numbers. The response has been overwhelming, and it is really, really incredible to see some of the demands for that. So you can go ahead and sign up. You can breakingpoints.com. You can use the promo code. We appreciate you. But let's get to Los Angeles, shall we?
Yeah, so there's a lot to get into here. So bear with us as we go through what has happened and gotten us to this place. Let's go ahead and put these images of unrest. These are all coming from last night out of LA County. Trump has, for the first time since 1992, federalized the National Guard. And this is the first time it's been federalized over the objections of the state governor for the first time since 1965. We're going to talk a lot about the legal pretext here. A lot of legal analysts say that this is illegal. Certainly Gavin Newsom is saying that this is illegal. But you can see here, this is just from last night. There were a bunch of Waymos that apparently they were like calling the Waymos to the protest and then setting the Waymos on fire. The Mexican flags flying here, that has become, something that a lot of the right have certainly seized upon. So wild images that you can see in the streets as protesters are clashing with, this is largely LAPD, even though the National Guard was brought in yesterday. My understanding is the National Guard mostly stayed around the federal building. Here, obviously, you can see these Waymos set on fire as well. And so while we continue to roll these images, I can just explain a little bit of how we got to this place. So the Trump administration, obviously, they ran on mass deportation. They have really upped the ante in recent days. Stephen Miller apparently went into an ICE meeting, was berating everybody for focusing on criminals and said, no, you need to go into the workplaces, go into the Home Depots. And that is exactly what ICE has been doing. So the initial protests kicked off at 2 locations in and near LA. You had a garment manufacturer where there was an ongoing ICE raid, and you had a Home Depot where ICE was massing and there was an expectation that there would be a raid. You have migrants who hang out there in the parking lot looking for work, et cetera. So protests begin, and there's a pretty aggressive response from the LAPD, and you have large tensions in the community, and you have people that begin to throw rocks back, and it just escalates from here. Just watch this one clip. This is a reporter for Australian news outlet. And crazy footage here. You see one of the cops turn directly to her and fire a rubber bullet that hits her directly. So this is, in any case, some of what's going on. So after the first night of protests, Trump decides that he is going to send in the National Guard. And the first indication we got of this, actually, Saagar, was Tom Homan went on before any sort of an announcement had been made and indicated that this was going to happen. And then we, in fact, got this memo from Trump saying exactly what he was going to do. We can put A2 up on the screen here, guys. This is the memo from the White House, which calls for bringing in the National Guard. He says, in recent days, violent mobs have attacked ICE officers and federal law enforcement agents carrying out basic deportation operations in LA, California. These operations are essential to halting and reversing the invasion of illegal criminals in the U.S. In the wake of this violence, California's feckless Democrat leaders have completely abdicated their responsibility to protect their citizens. That's why President Trump has signed a presidential memorandum deploying 2,000 National Guardsmen to address the lawlessness that has been allowed to fester. The Trump administration has a zero-tolerance policy for criminal behavior and violence, especially when that violence is aimed at law enforcement officers trying to do their jobs. These criminals will be arrested, swiftly brought to justice. Commander-in-Chief will ensure the laws of the U.S. are executed fully and completely, signed by Caroline Leavitt, White House press secretary. Now, notably, he did not actually invoke the Insurrection Act, which would give sort of broader legal justification for using the military against civilians. Goes without saying, these are extraordinary and unusual actions that are being taken. But instead of invoking the Insurrection Act, he used something called Title X authority. Now, the plain-faced reading of this appears to require that the governor of the state request, or at least consent, to the federalizing of National Guard troops under Title X. Again, the last time that National Guard troops were federalized with the consent of the California governor was in 1992 to deal with the LA riots. You had dozens of people who were killed, $1 billion in property damage. That's the last time that National Guard troops were federalized. The last time that they were federalized over the objection of the state leadership was 1965. This was under LBJ, to deal with incalcitrant southern state that did not want to desegregate. So that's the level that we're talking about here in terms of actions. Trump got asked what he planned and whether he was going to invoke the Insurrection Act. Let's go ahead and take a listen to a little bit of what he had to say here.
Even if you don't plan to invoke the Insurrection Act, do you plan to send troops to Los Angeles?
What?
Even if you're not planning to invoke that Insurrection Act, do you still plan to send troops?
Well, we're going to have troops everywhere. We're not going to let this happen to our country. We're not going to let our country be torn apart like it was under Biden and his auto pen.
What is the bar for sending Marines to
the bar is what I think it is. I mean, if we see danger to our country and to our citizens, we'll be very, very strong in terms of law and order. It's about law and order.
Sending active duty Marines on the table, sir. Secretary Hegseth.
We're going to see what we need. We'll send whatever we need to make sure there's law and order.
And so you hear him there, troops everywhere, and we'll see with regard to the Insurrection Act and the Marines. This was the other piece. We can put go ahead and skip ahead to A7, and we'll just lay this piece out, and then I'll get Saagar's reaction here. Pete Hegseth floating that they could get the Marines involved. He says the violent mob assaults on ICE and federal law enforcement are designed to prevent the removal of criminal illegal aliens from our soil. Under President Trump, violence and destruction will not be tolerated. The Department of Defense is mobilizing the National Guard immediately. And if violence continues, active duty Marines at Camp Pendleton will also be mobilized. They are on high alert. Yesterday evening, CNN reported that there were a number of Marines indeed who were prepared to deploy. Let's go ahead, guys, and play A7B.
I also want to ask you about some breaking news that we're just getting in. This is brand new into our newsroom, that the U.S. Northern Command is saying that approximately 500 active duty Marines are, quote, prepared to deploy, in their words, as unrest in Los Angeles continues. This is after, of course, the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, had mentioned this. Is that necessary at this point?
No, not operationally, it's not necessary. There may be other reasons for it.
All right, so there you go. So we'll get into in a moment some of the legal analysis, the Democratic response, but just pause for a second and give you a chance to react.
Sure, actually, I don't usually do this, but the New York Times actually had some pretty good analysis of it this morning. They said Trump jumps at a chance for confrontation in California immigration. The situation has all the elements that the president seeks, a showdown with the top political rival in a deep blue state over an issue core to the agenda. And I think that's probably the best way to look at it. I mean, one of the things that you laid out there was that past reporting about Stephen Miller really pressuring workplace raids as opposed to criminal raids. That was something that immediately followed the reporting in Los Angeles. Los Angeles and New York City are the two of the top targets from ICE. I believe Los Angeles in particular, sanctuary city, one that has long kind of held itself up against immigration enforcement. That leads to some of the protests there. What is it, Paramount, I believe, California.
Yeah.
So then you have the initial kickoff. I mean, my own personal analysis of it is it didn't seem particularly necessary to send the National Guard in because, look, I don't think this is like BLM. BLM was, first of all, this was a lot more protests, a lot more property damage, a lot more violence. But even beyond that, there was genuine reluctance to use police forces in a lot of these blue cities. LAPD looks pretty ready to rock and roll, from what I've been able to see. So I was they seem to be okay. But I mean, a lot of it really is just downstream of BLM redux for a lot of people on the American right. And also, I mean, we have to acknowledge Trump is in a relatively precarious political position. And this is an issue which we'll talk about tomorrow, some of his polling and all that. Immigration remains one of his #1 core areas. You've got some of those images that you were talking about of burning cars, Mexican flags. I mean, I don't think it takes a political genius to say this is dramatically unpopular. I think in general, what America seems to be sensitive to is who is the more chaotic element. And we've talked about this before. I think up until this point, you could very easily assume that the Trump administration was the more chaotic actor in immigration. We had the Kilmar-Abrego-Garcia case, which we're going to talk about a little bit later in the show. We had, El Salvador, some of these extraordinary actions and all of this. But in particular, what's happened here is when you see a flip and it goes into rioting, into violence, and then you see that law enforcement can seem to have a moral upper hand, it becomes a lot more dicey. And so that is something that the Trump administration, part of the reason I think that they wanted an image like this is they really are getting, I think, a lot of what they want. They're getting the Mexican flags, they're getting the burning in the streets. They're, regardless of whether you think, Newsom and Karen Bass are being feckless or not, a lot of people in the upper Midwest and some of the swing state areas, they're going to think that. I mean, I also would be remiss if I didn't say, I know a lot of people in the city of Los Angeles, and a lot of them were texting me being like, hey man, if you are covering this, please just know that 99.9% of us are living our lives, and downtown LA is a place that none of us even go. So just so you're all aware, and I always think that's important to say. It's the entire city is not on fire or anything like that. This is not Rodney King. In fact, May Day parades are there's always Mexican flags flying in LA.
Well,
so it's
also, love these people are so concerned about foreign flags now.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I mean, listen, should an Israeli flag fly in America? No. Should should an Israeli flag fly in America? In my opinion, no. Should a Mexican flag fly in this? Yeah, I think it's a little. I mean, I will say, look, I don't know really why these people are they're addicted to doing some of the most unpopular things possible. I mean, if you saw some of the initial Floydian response, like in the early days of Floyd, and I'm talking about before the Minneapolis police precinct and all that was burned down and people were peacefully marching in the street, that's very difficult, for people to be able to mobilize against. And this is now entering a situation which I think broadly there is a consensus. They're like, this is, I think, pretty strong footing for Donald Trump. We will see, of course. Things are very different, though, from that time previously. But by and large, I mean, we should make some of it because it is extraordinary, the threat of the ability to have active duty soldiers, the National Guards at 2,000. But I don't want to overplay it because there's a lot of people on like, oh my God, this is BLM. I'm like, no, this is not even remotely the same. This is a relatively, thousands of people, yes, but we're not talking about millions. We're not talking about contagion, spread across the entire city or any of that. And so I do think it's important to contextualize it as well. Like Los Angeles itself, it's mostly fine.
Yeah. I think I agree with most of that. What I will say is, I mean, to me, number one, like Trump was looking for a pretext to have this sort of militarized response for basically his entire administration. I mean, on day one, he signed an executive order that we covered here of like, hey, will you study whether I should invoke the Insurrection Act? So he's been looking for a pretext. We know last time around he wanted to shoot protesters in the knees, and I think it was Esper who was like, you can't do that. Esper and people like that are no longer around him. And to your point, I think what the right and certainly Trump and his people took from the first administration was we didn't go far enough. Like we weren't wild enough, whether it's with the crackdown on dissent or the aggressive response to protest or even the economic regime with the tariffs, all of these sorts of things. They took all the guardrails off. And so there is not going to be a Mark Esper in place now to say, hey, you can't federalize the National Guard over the objections of the governor of California. That's not something that is legal or permissible. And, to turn troops on American citizens, like that is an extraordinary thing. So, to me, the big picture is this is an authoritarian guy. I think you're right to say that I think he feels a little politically tenuous now, whereas support even on his best issue, which is immigration, has slipped significantly. It's still where he does the best, but it's slipped significantly. And they were looking for a reason to take exactly this sort of action. I also will say, I mean, when you have this kind of chaos in the streets, it is exactly the sort of thing that somebody with these authoritarian tendencies will seize on to, hey, let's expand that Palantir database. Yeah, right. Hey, let's normalize having the military in the streets for domestic law enforcement. And so, for me, that's the most important point. But I also agree with you, like the Mexican flag on the burning Waymo is such a terrible image optically that I'm like, are these actually feds? Like, you have to ask the question because it plays into their hands so perfectly. It is exactly the kind of images that they want to get out, that they want to put out to the public. How the public perceives all of this, I'm not going to speculate because I do think that there is a sense that Trump is stoking this, that he wants this, that, LA was doing fine, actually. Violent crime, these sorts of things were like way down year over year, was doing okay. There was not rioting in the streets before he starts to take extraordinary actions, both with ICE and then bringing in the National Guard. How the public will sort through all of this, I don't know. But to me, those are the most significant pieces. And especially when you're floating things like, I'm going to bring in the Marines. I mean, that is so unhinged and crazy. That is hard to wrap your head around.
That they haven't done it yet is that they, like I said, whoever seems like the crazier party is going to get a lot of the blame. And I think the Marines, I mean, that is a genuinely extraordinary step. 2000, look, I mean, we can contextualize, it is pretty insane that, for the first time since 1965, we're talking about Selma, Alabama, that a National Guard has been mobilized without a governor's action.
Yeah.
It's also 2,000 troops. these are also people not out in the streets. These are people who are around like VA facilities and federal buildings. In fact, from what I've seen, I believe they've only fired like tear gas outside of that the federal building. It's mostly LA. I mean, almost all of the really chaotic images people are watching, that's LAPD. This is like a support mission. This is LAPD. And I believe in some cases, the Department of Homeland Security. So we'll see how things progress today. I mean, I'm curious actually to see how the protesters on the ground in Los Angeles and perhaps even leaders of these protest movements and all of this are contextualizing it, because from my perspective, it has been kind of interesting to watch how, I mean, I think last time around, like all the memes around mostly peaceful and riot is the voice of the unheard and all that, there was like a justification of genuine violence and looting from the very top of the Democratic establishment and the media. This time around, that's just not the case. I mean, you're criticizing the Mexican flag. Most people are like, what are you guys doing here? And so in a certain sense,
I don't have a morality issue with it, but I think it's optically idiotic.
But I'm saying last time around, they wouldn't even admit that. Last time around, they wouldn't even admit. They're like, hey, maybe you shouldn't loot a Marc Jacobs store, right? They're like, oh, actually, it's fine because property damage is not as bad as George Floyd or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't hear any of that this time around. I don't see, even the left lunatic immigration people on TV being like, actually, this is totally justified. I think you see the stray accounts there on Twitter, but a lot of the ACAB energy and all of that, it just seems very online and not as enshrined in the mainstream. There's also a big difference from 2020 where, look, I mean, everyone can acknowledge there's been a lot of scientific research on this. Part of the reason the protests were as big as they were is a lot of people were locked in their houses and they were staring at a screen. There was like a mass psychosis that took over the entire country. We could debate, all of that. I've done plenty here, but that's not the case right now. It's, what is it, June something? It's summer. People are living their lives like broadly. And while people are paying attention to the news, I think people are still upset about the tariffs. That's one of the things I think really, I don't think we have fully internalized how much that tariff 45-day period actually cost Trump in terms of the confidence of the American people and a lot of some of the stress and other things that were on businesses and all that, just even my own personal life and being able to talk to people. It's the number one thing I hear about the way that the tariffs disrupt. And it's not even about cost increase. It was, my job did this. We were worried about this. You cost people, for real. This is a little bit different. And so anyways, watching it closely, obviously, it is most an impactful story for how the Trump administration wants to deal with it. It's also, let's be honest, it's a message to the entire country, to New York City, to Chicago, to, I'm thinking of any other big blue city. It's a message to them. It's like, if you don't get this shit under control very quickly, you will have the guard federalized in your state immediately. And so in a sense, it is more of a preemptory action from what I can see. And also, like I said at the beginning, Trump is on precarious political footing. This is not a good time for him. This is probably the best possible thing that could have happened for him.
The more that, this is what I've said before, the more his political standing slips, the more he's going to resort to increasingly authoritarian tactics. And I think this is part and parcel with that. And you have to put it in the broader context of all of the actions that Trump has taken in office, whether it's, trying to bring the media organizations to heel, whether it's the student protester crackdown, whether it's the Palantir surveillance database, all of these actions that he has taken in order to claim control, even the tariffs. Tariffs are put into place under this claim that there is some sort of national emergency, something that the courts are now looking at very skeptically. But all of these things are about crushing dissent, consolidating control. And so, yes, they are going to take any pretext that they can to further those goals. And to, I think you're absolutely right that this is a warning to not only to states or localities, it's also a warning to protesters. We have had, and not just pro-Palestine protesters, like anyone who would protest this administration. We've had his counterterror czar go on TV and say, hey, if you don't like Teslas, now that one may be changing now. You might be able to, it's okay to not like Teslas now.
I was
you have that freedom again.
that I bought this before Elon went crazy things. I was like, surging in Alabama and Mississippi.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
I would love to see Amazon sales data on who's buying those.
Who's buying those now? Yeah, Trump may be sticking one on his Tesla outside the White House. But in any case, so you have the counterterror czar who floated, if you're a domestic terrorist, if you heard a Tesla, you're a domestic terrorist. If you participate in like the hands-off protests, you're a domestic terrorist, certainly if you are pro-Palestine. And so they will use anything they can to crush dissent and claim power. The fact that it's Gavin Newsom, that's only fuels the fire. There was some, indications that there's been a back and forth, and I think this is part of the context and the background here as well. Trump is preparing to strip a lot of federal funding from the state of California. And Gavin Newsom said something in return, basically like, hey, you should keep in mind that we are a mass net contributor to taxes. We put in way more federal taxes than we get back, and maybe we should reconsider that relationship. And it's, just shortly on the heels of him making those comments that this, extraordinary action is taken by Trump, which again, I just want people to think about the comparison between these protests, which are really pretty, especially day one. Now we got cars burning, whatever, after the National Guard gets brought in, which I think just heightened the tension and escalated the chaos. But in any case, these are fairly run-of-the-mill protests. Like, this was nothing the LAPD, with their 7,000 or 9,000 or however many cops they have, were unable to handle. Compare that to the LA riots, right?
Oh, yeah, that was crazy.
I mean, there is no comparison here. You had 60 plus people who were killed, who were shot dead. You had, whole neighborhoods, businesses looted $1 billion in 1992 in property damage. That was a very different situation. And it's also a very different situation from 1965, when you have southern states saying we are not going to desegregate, in open defiance of the federal government. So, in terms of the legal standing here, like I said before, it is noteworthy he hasn't invoked the Insurrection Act, which actually came as a surprise. Everyone sort of assumed that was what he would do, because that would allow him the most expansive powers. Instead, they use this Title X authority, which seems to, the legal justification, if you read between the lines on the legal analyses that I've been reading, would seem to indicate that they might be able to get away with this limited support role. And, but even that, to do it without the governor's consent, Gavin Newsom is clearly, he has stated clearly he believes that it's illegal. And we could put A5B up on the screen here. Let's get a bit of his response. He has formally requested they rescind their unlawful deployment of troops in LA County, return them to my command. He says, we didn't have a problem until Trump got involved. This is a serious breach of state sovereignty, inflaming tensions while pulling resources from where they're actually needed. Rescind the order, return control to California. I think this is probably the first step before he actively files suit in order to try to force the courts to require this rescission of this order, which he calls unlawful. Many scholars agree is unlawful. Let's put A5 up on the screen. This was his kind of initial reaction and has been the tone that he's been striking. He says the federal government is moving to take over the California National Guard and deploy 2,000 soldiers. That move is purposefully inflammatory, will only escalate tensions. LA authorities are able to access law enforcement assistance at a moment's notice. We're in close coordination. The Guard has been admirably serving LA throughout recovery. This is the wrong mission and will erode public trust. And Tom Homan has been threatening Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass, who's the mayor of LA, with potential arrest. So Gavin got asked about this yesterday, and here's what he had to say.
He's been here 10 years. The fear, the horror, the hell is this guy? Come after me, arrest me. Let's just get it over with. Tough guy. I don't give a damn. But I care about my community. I care about this community. The hell are they doing? These guys need to grow up. They need to stop. And we need to push back. And I'm sorry to be so clear, but that kind of bloviating is exhausting. So, Tom, arrest me. Let's go.
So he says, arrest me, let's go. So, he's certainly coming out very strongly in terms of his rhetoric and pushing back against this. And like I said, I think that letter is significant because it probably is step one before he officially files suit to try to get a court to strike this down.
Yeah, so we'll see. I mean, I think a lot of it is, it's interesting even also in terms of the way that they're responding, because their response, like I said, I mean, this is part of where I do see Democratic leaders acting very differently. They're like, hey, we have all the resources to handle this, right? They're like, we are ready to roll. And again, I mean, look, you can call Karen Bass woke and all. I mean, I think she has actually been a terrible mayor when we were talking about the LA fires. But in this case, I mean, I have not yet seen evidence or anything like that she's like telling the LAPD to stand down or not to enforce the law. I mean, we don't want to downplay it. You shouldn't be, people throwing rocks at federal agents. It's like not normal. It's not good. And so that's something that is going to be happening. It's going to, of course, invite a response. But yeah, broadly, this is a clash of big political forces. And, we should contextualize it certainly, in terms of the situation, which people are hyper-focused on that, and then also in the broader picture, like you're saying, about what this really means, what with the Trump administration, its view of power. I do think it's very interesting they didn't do the Insurrection Act. And, there's a couple of things that we can look to and say that the Trump administration, within their view, is trying to appear more reasonable, like this time around. This may sound crazy to somebody like you, but think about it. I mean, look, National Guard is not, 2000 National Guard is not the Insurrection Act. It's not, we're threatening all of these things. We got later on in the show, Kilmar Abrigo Garcia is back in the United States. I mean, I don't think anybody would have said that was going to happen 20 days ago. Whenever I went on leave, what did we all say? It's never going to happen. I think, don't we have tape of Kirstie Noem? She's like, exactly it's not going to. They buckled, right? Like eventually they did buckle to the court. They're taking L after L right now at the Supreme Court, with or in the court system as well. Like they have got, they're on the back foot a little bit, and they're not stupid either to see also, which we're about to talk about, with Doge and with Elon. That cost them a lot of political capital. Between Doge and tariffs, they have serious problems. Now, I'm not going to downplay, what the future and all of this will look like. But, in a sense, like I can see that there is a calibration within their worldview for what is happening right now. And while, yes, there's testing of the waters and things, I think that people are also, there are people in the White House and all of that, there's a tug, of war between the Stephen Miller and then also between people who are looking, at the future for the midterms. Let's not forget, we don't have it on the show, this tax bill is about to pass. No matter what you think of the tax bill, I mean, anytime you give, permanent tax cuts to the wealthiest people in the United States, because effectively what they're doing is enshrining the current law into law, as well as a bunch of other stuff. That never polls very popularly, and that's a huge benefit. We still don't know if Medicaid or whatever is on the table, but there's a precarious political landscape in the next 1 to 2 years that I see for them.
Let me just put this last piece up on the screen. This is A8B, Trump's, I think this is his most recent truth. I don't know, I'm not sure, but one of his more recent truths. This is his latest thoughts. He says, a once great American city, LA, has been invaded and occupied by illegal aliens and criminals. Now violent insurrectionist mobs are swarming and attacking our federal agents to try and stop our deportation operations. These lawless riots only strengthen our resolve. I'm directing Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, Attorney General Pam Bondi, in coordination with all other relevant departments and agencies to take all such action necessary to liberate Los Angeles from the migrant invasion and put an end to these migrant riots. That's another thing, is they're trying to project like the people participating here are all immigrants, are undocumented, and there's just no proof. I mean, I think vast majority are very likely American citizens in any case.
You think so? I actually don't. I mean, LA is...
LA has a massive immigrant population, but also a massive, like people who were immigrants and are now citizens population.
There's no way, no.
Yeah, I mean, but that's what...
it's also, the second largest city in the United States of America,
right?
I think. So,
it
probably does have a very large illegal population, like, let's be honest.
Sure.
I don't know. Again, we have no census data.
I think it's unlikely, frankly, because most people who are undocumented are very leery of doing much of anything right now because they're afraid of being picked up and deported. So the risk is much higher. Listen, we have no numbers, but that's what they want to project, is that this is all like undocumented immigrants and it's an invasion of LA, and that's why they're seizing on the display of the Mexican flag.
They're not seizing on it. It's a Mexican flag. Like there's Mexican flags all over it.
Again,
like it's everywhere. It's a problem.
But there are also American flags, but you don't see those being highlighted.
I don't see very many of them. I was looking for some images. No,
that's what they want to put forward.
Come on, we got plenty of images here. I didn't see any.
To be honest with you, I actually watched a clip that Elon retweeted that showcased a bunch of American flags.
I see a lot more
out there.
Mexican flags.
But they don't.
No people are illegal on stolen. I mean, look,
that's the
this
thing
is typical leftist fare. It's fine. I'm not going to sit here and like cat turd it up or whatever. But like, let's be honest about who we're dealing with here. Like,
sure. But like I was saying, I think there's also an element of this where Trump's rhetoric on immigration this time, although there was, some talk about like, oh, they're taking your housing, you're taking your jobs. It was more about they're emptying the insane asylums and these are all criminals and we're going to go after these criminals and deport them. And there simply aren't that many undocumented immigrants who are criminals. And so I think part of this as well is since you have this increasing sort of realization of who is actually being targeted, who is actually being deported, and there tend to be more sympathetic figures and people who are just like here trying to, live a life and work and get a job and whatever. This can substitute in for portraying that level of like criminality and lawlessness, I think is part of the reason why they're making this affirmative effort to project that everyone participating is an undocumented immigrant, which is like definitely not the case. So in any case, I think that's part of the narrative that they are trying to spin here as well.
Oh yeah,
and to your point,
and it helps.
And
you burn cars and you have Mexican flags.
Absolutely agree that when you have, like I said before, the image of a burning Waymo with a Mexican flag is so perfect for them that I have to ask, it seems way too on the nose. So in any case,
you got to remember too, most of the country has never been to Los Angeles.
Right.
If you live in a red state, like you think San Francisco is just like riddled with shit because it's like the Tenderloin district.
Right.
Or you think, and look, I'm not downplaying that because it is terrible. I've been there, I've seen it, it's awful. Or downtown LA, like seeing this, what I forget exactly what it's called. I'm completely blanking on it. That area of downtown, Skid Row. That is one of the worst things I've ever seen in my whole life, ever seen. I'm talking about the slums of Mumbai are comparable to the Skid Row. It is horrific. So I don't want to downplay that. There is a tendency, though, in the middle America and others, to think that that's what it all looks like, or Chicago is all like, Chirac or whatever. But Mexican flags burning in the middle, they don't know. So when you see images of the 405 in LA being blocked up, in Alabama, in Michigan, in Pennsylvania, and all this, I can guarantee you, these things are going viral all across the country. I mean, look, we could debate forever about illegal immigration and deportation. I mean, at the end of the day, if you're here illegally, you are liable to be deported. Whether you should be or not, we can argue that all day long. But as the law currently stands, and as the law that's about to, I think, probably going to go into effect, like that's something that is going to be happening. Again, we can debate morality, et cetera, of all of that. But at the end of the day, having people throw things at federal agents, Mexican flags, and all of that, these are sympathetic images for the Trump administration. In fact, I mean, it almost makes me question why they started with these Mahmoud Khalils, and I'm blanking on the guy's name, the Buddhist guy. I mean, these are like 10 times more sympathetic figures. Like, why did they start with the pro-Palestinian movement in a certain sense? I mean, we could probably talk forever about that, but it's interesting.
Let me make one more point, and then we can talk about Elon with us, which actually there's a tie-in too, because Elon is like, seizing on this to kind of like, smooth over some of his ruptured ties with MAGA. But in any case, I think what I was talking to Kyle about this last night, and he was saying like they were gonna, like, it doesn't matter whether the protests are peaceful or not peaceful or whatever, they were gonna do this sort of thing anyway. And I think there's a reasonable point to be made about that, because the pro-Palestine protests,
that's true.
The thing about the pro-Palestine protests though, they really were sort of a model movement, including really highlighting Jewish voices at the center of it, peaceful. Like the most aggressive thing they did was to take over that one building on the Columbia campus, which, you can debate and dispute, but that is sort of grounded in typical, like, anti-war protest movement, tactics, and they were really, really disciplined. And, you know, anytime you have a movement, a large movement of people, you're gonna have some people who do some things that are like, you know, some graffiti or something that you don't. But considering the number of people and the extent of locations and all of that, they were really disciplined. And there was a significant crackdown. Now, the National Guard wasn't called in, but there was a significant crackdown, and there has been an aggressive, over-the-top federal government response, right? Including pulling all the, you know, ability of Harvard to have foreign students at all, and taking over Middle Eastern studies departments, and arresting people like Mahmoud Khalil, and arresting Mohsen Mandawi, and arresting Misa Ozturk for writing an op-ed, and you know, really punishing anyone who would dissent from that narrative. So in a sense, would they have called in the National Guard? Would it be exactly the same? Hard to say, but there is a top-down crackdown on dissent, regardless of how good or perfect your protest movement is. That is certainly the case. But I think what you're pointing to, well, what I will say for myself, is that it also matters how the public receives that protest movement. And so, you know, in the case of the pro-Palestine movement, even though it hasn't moved our elected officials because they're genocidal, horrific maniacs, whether you're talking about Biden or you're talking about Trump, the way public opinion has moved has been extraordinary. You know, the only old Republicans basically are now more pro-Israel than pro-Palestine, and that is a wild shift. I think another successful protest model in Trump 2.0 era has been, you mentioned Kilmar Abrego Garcia. Mm-hmm. There were protests, there were peaceful protests, there was, you know, a significant effort of calling and writing members of Congress. There were people showing up at these town halls to yell at them, and, you know, massive upset. You had Democratic politicians respond by actually going to El Salvador, keeping the pressure on the issue. You had the courts responding as well. So you had all of these layers. And because of that, when you poll on Kilmar Abrego Garcia specifically, it is one of Trump's worst polling issues. People are disgusted with how he handled it. And the more that was in the news, the more that the pressure was kept on and that was kept in the news, the more that Trump's overall approval on immigration fell. And so now, actually, his approval rating on immigration has recovered a bit. His overall approval has recovered a bit as that has become, you know, more back burner in terms of the news and hasn't been in everyone's face. So there are models of, you know, movements that have used successful tactics that have really swayed public opinion and have moved people to their side, and have even successfully, in some ways, you know, when we talk about Kilmar, checked some of the ambitions of the Trump administration. So I do think, you know, I know people get pissed off when you like, oh, why are you nitpicking the tactics? But look, this is not a game. This is very serious. These are wannabe fascists, and he is an authoritarian who wants to use whatever pretext he can to crack down and to crush dissent and to spin, you know, to create images and spin a narrative and tell a story that plays into his hands. And so, you know, I think it's really important to be smart and strategic and not give him what he wants to provide a more effective pretext.
Well, they're never going to listen to me. So for all the protest leaders,
they're not going to listen.
From Chris.
Yeah.
No, I think they would listen to you, actually. They probably hate me, but that's fine. You know, I love you guys too. It's okay. All right, let's go on to Elon. Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.